Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Behind the Podium podcast. I think this is number 4 or 5, I want to say. Here we are behind the podium, and this is where we talk about the practices, struggles, and philosophies of the coach, the healthcare practitioner, teacher, continuing to expand the definition, but really thinking that coach is a well understood placeholder for what we're getting after here, and wanting to continue to talk about. And with that in mind, today the topic is, how coachable are you? What does it mean to be coachable? And obviously with our context here, what does it mean to be coachable as a already existing coach? And perhaps what does it mean to be coachable within your field of specialty or expertise? But again, expertise is kind of one of those vague words. So I'm Jared Cohen, joined with me,
Alexander Ellis.
And we are going to get in. Alex, I will let you start, and you can say whatever comes to mind when you think of the word coachable.
Coachable. Well, actually, when you were saying behind the podium, I feel like we're a few steps behind the podium where we can turn to one another and be like, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Can you help me out? And I think that is one of the huge things about being coachable, is being willing to admit that you don't have the answers, that you're not perfect, and that nobody expects you to have all of the answers. And I think that really carries across through many realms. I'm thinking, business. As coaches, many of us are also entrepreneurs and trying to make stuff happen. And nobody expects me to be a web coder and a designer and a salesperson and do all of those well. So why in my coaching do I have this expectation of myself that I need to be everything for everyone and have all the answers? So I think the more we're able to be a little bit more vague almost about being a coach, and not saying oh, this is coaching, it's different, I should have all the answers, but being willing to ask people for help. And through the help, also getting a lot of creativity and inspiration. Just about coaching specifically, and if you read my blog, I've been talking about how you and I have been working together outside of the podcast, and you're giving me workouts. And for me, it's awesome to not have to think about what to do, just to look at my printout, just make it happen. And I'm also getting a ton of really great ideas that are inspiring my classroom of things to do that we've never done before because they didn't come from my brain. I stole them from yours. And so many different facets of my life have been inspired by our collaboration. And I think being open to being coachable is one of the most valuable things you can do for yourself and for your teaching.
Yeah, I really like the point about collaboration as an aspect of what it means to be coachable, and perhaps thinking about it through the lens of collaboration is a little bit more, it's less threatening for some people, that may feel like, taking on what someone else is offering or trying to advise them with is in some way invalidating what they've done up until that point, or what they've held to be truths for them. You mentioned the word willing. And when I was thinking about this yesterday, this topic, willingness, that word, just willingness in and of itself, kept coming up as I was trying to think about characteristics and features of what it means to be coachable. And what I found was it was kind of a relationship between qualities of willingness and then certain abilities. And that based on your willingness, you then perhaps even cultivate abilities that make you appear coachable. Because what I mean by abilities is I've worked with clients where maybe not upfront or in a conversational way they've appeared coachable, but then when we start working together, they display the ability of being coachable just by how well they are able to respond to the cues I'm giving them, right? And then make quick changes. So it made me think about, there's an ability that may not be one and the same of the same sort of willingness, whereas someone else may come in and they're like, look, lay it on me, whatever you got, I'm a blank slate, man. But then in practice, they're less able to maybe get out of their own way, to really kind of take on what you're giving them, in spite of the fact that they have the best intentions and they have, that willingness up front. But what I would say is, on the side of willingness, the first thing that came to my mind was that, are you willing to embrace what you don't know you don't know? And this has been taught to me as the 3-ring philosophy. And the first ring is, you know what you know. The second ring is, you know what you don't know. And then that third ring is, you don't know what you don't know. And that most change is going to occur in that third ring, where that inspiration is going to happen and the creativity is going to unfold as you're having these aha moments, because you allowed yourself to kind of be like, whoa, I didn't know this thing existed, and now it's a part of me, and now I can play with it and connect with it.
And I think also, when you think of like, well, what is coaching but somebody delivering information to you over whatever avenue? And as teachers and coaches, we learn through a variety of methods. Maybe you've gone and done a training, or maybe there are some things that you do and know that are self-taught, that you found on the internet, or you read a book or something like that. So we already are seekers of information, I'd say, for the most part. And we have a special ability to not only seek the information out, but then, understand and synthesize it to put it into action, whether it's for ourselves or for our clients. So asking for the help from a person is no different from, finding some interesting factoid about fascia and then utilizing that in having that inform what you teach that week.
Totally. Obviously that it's that public display of, of asking the question that creates the vulnerability. And, I think about a lot how I will be in certain circumstances where I'm having a conversation, usually more in like a group of people, and something is brought up that I don't really quite know about. And instead of like disrupting the flow of the conversation, or also just making it like blatantly obvious that I'm a little confused, right? Like it's like the quick Google check of like whatever.
I'm so guilty of that. I'm always like, yeah. And they're like, do you know what that is? I'm like, no, I have no idea.
Yeah. And again, it's just that concept of vulnerability. And I think for me, the vulnerability is more tied to not wanting to feel like the other stuff that I do know, which in a certain moment I feel like is very related to this thing I don't know becomes totally invalidated, or at least appears invalid to other people. And I think, for me, it's that like the adjacency of topics that then, shakes me a little bit, where, I'll be talking about, some kind of physiological or anatomical thing, and then someone gives me some word like I don't know, and I'm kind of like, oh God, like now I'm looking like an idiot, and how can I keep up this conversation, or like this game of ping pong, right? It's like, oh, now like I'm gonna hit one into the net.
And sometimes you do.
Yeah.
And I think as creative people, because I know both you and I are that creative mindset. I've seen like memes on the internet where it's like, oh, I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so smart. Oh my God, I'm crap. I know nothing. And oh, I should just quit now.
Yeah.
It's just like the evolution of the creative brain. I mean, I go through that like a few times a day, I feel like. And it is really hard to, you want to seek information from somebody because you admire them or they inspire you. You look up to them for some reason. And then it is hard to hear what they have to say and be fascinated, but also not let that negative self-talk come in. Like, I don't know anything. I'm crap. And I think that's just something that we have to deal with. And both you and I are in our mid-20s. I wonder if
that's a good point.
you get more confident as you get older. People keep telling me that your 30s are way better, and I'm like, well, maybe when I'm 30, I won't care.
Yeah, and I think like the other point with that too is that we both are we're in our mid-20s, and we teach to a lot of people that are older than us all the time. Yeah, and that can throw a wrench in our self-confidence at times as well, where, we want to continue to uphold the authority on a particular topic, as we should, based on everything we've dedicated to learning it and experimenting with it, and wanting to convey that understanding for someone to take trust in what we're doing, and at the same time realizing that there is this gap in life experience and knowledge just from being alive longer, and wanting to make sure that gap doesn't pose an issue, or is looked down upon because, what does this person know? They're so young. I know I'm always hesitant to say how old I am, just for a lot of people within the gym space, because they all perceive me to be so much older.
Well, you have a beard. I don't have that going.
That's true.
Me.
Yeah. The beard does help for sure. But then sometimes I feel like then when I give them the actual number, it could work in your favor, because you're like, oh wow, I thought you were so much older. But then at the same time,
that never happens.
Maybe it shatters some glass for them.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I thought you were 16. I'm like, no, I'm not 16.
Yeah, that right. So the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
No, I'm not 12.
I know. I
just got married.
Hey, God. That actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because this whole age thing, I've dealt with that for many years, and that's been one of my big insecurities for a long time, because I am standing in front of groups of people at corporations or in studios, blah, 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 and everybody in the room is older than I am. But I think to help a little bit with the negative self-talk, and something I just keep telling myself is they're here because they have something to learn. And, even if they know some of the same stuff I do, or they know more than I do, they may not know more about X, Y, Z. That's why they're here, to learn, And those are the types of, you only attract people who want to learn from you. That's your community. And then I found other funny ways to diffuse the tension for myself, because I'm the one who's worried about it. And so then I'll crack a joke about oh, well, I can rent a car. And being able now, honestly, to say that I have a husband also makes me sound way older. I'm like, yes.
Totally. Just dropping the husband bomb.
I know.
Just throw that in sorry guys, we're starting a couple minutes late. My husband couldn't get the car working.
Yeah.
It's
P.S. I'm not a child bride.
Yeah, right. a point to that, you just said, people are there to learn. And I think the overarching idea to that is that like, it's not about you.
No.
And I just listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast with Derek Sivers.
Ooh.
And that was really fascinating. I was not familiar with Derek Sivers prior to this podcast. Quick little bio for those that don't know. He is a musician, and but got his sort of more public persona and business experience with creating CD Baby, which was the kind of first of its kind online store for independent musicians. Sold that around 2008, and has created his own online presence through that entrepreneurial space, as well as being an author and talking about very similar themes of self-mastery and self-exploration along the lines of, kind of Tim Ferriss's content, hence why they were a good pairing to have a conversation. But anyway, to backtrack, Derek Sivers, he was a musician at the Berklee College of Music, and for a summer job, he was doing gigs playing with a circus. And then one thing led to another, and he was like full-on circus clown, emceeing the shows. And he was talking about how at first his confidence was a huge barrier in the type of show he could MC. And it wasn't until the boss really kind of gave him the perspective shift of like, look, it's not about you out there. Like people didn't come to evaluate your showmanism, right? They came to enjoy this show. So give them the show, and the idea of like being able to, again, remove ourselves from the equation and say like, hey, like people didn't come here for the most part, I hope, to like assess my expertise, right? They came here to learn something. And for me, like, I want to help them be better and I want to empower them. And so like, let's just start from there and let the chips fall where they may with that as the context.
Yeah, it's like we are, as coaches and teachers, are just the delivery vehicle for the content. So being coachable is just allowing another delivery vehicle to deliver content to you that you didn't know that you didn't know.
Definitely. Little side note, do you ever find like sometimes in the yoga tune-up community, I feel out of place because there are so many older individuals in the sense like they're married and have kids, and like sometimes I feel like in conversation, like I'm so like so kind of left out of that. Like
yeah, you and I are old souls though.
Yes,
and I feel like you might. Like all of my best friends, with the exception of my best friend from college who I've known since we were like 17, all my other friends are in their 40s with kids.
Yeah.
And that's just like who I want to hang out with. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, you talk about kids, and then I always feel like I'm referring to my dog, and I'm like, I hope they don't think that I think their kids are dogs. They're like, my dog is my kid.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing. I know you have a dog too.
Yeah, I mean, I always make the point like kids are easier because you can reason with them, right?
No,
like,
but not when they're babies. Dogs are easier true. Because you can leave them alone.
Yes,
and they won't tell anybody.
But once happened. You get so like once you're in like the 3-year-old range, I would argue like the power to reason is strong.
Yeah, but then they get to the 13-year-old range and they have zero reasoning.
That's true.
No, there's a reason why I have dogs. It's because my dog does what I tell her to do 90% of the time.
Yeah, my dog, she likes to exhibit a lot of selective listening.
I know. What is that?
Sometimes it mind boggles me how well she sits when there's food and how unwell she sits when there isn't food. And I'm confused.
Maybe we could have Cesar Milan come on the show. Well,
yes. Cesar Milan always. He's kind of like, he sort of lives at our apartment because Mary Jane is like a Cesar Milan disciple and wannabe apprentice. So she, I think the viewers, the listeners won't be able to see this, but here's a little Caesar's Way.
Caesar's Way is
right
on the nightstand table.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, it's like, so for me, like I watch Caesar, like now we'll refer to dog training, and YouTube videos and, get all this information from other people. Like it's no different when it comes to your body and your coaching. So I think that's what we need to do, is to like remove coaching and being coachable from its like own sphere. Like it's not its own thing. It's just another way to distill and synthesize information and put it to good use, just in a different atmosphere. So don't get as special. It's not as special as you think it is. It's just information about your body.
About your body. Yeah. I think what's hard though is, when you are confronted with that moment of like assimilating information that appears contradictory to one another. And, for instance, I'm very interested from afar of the coach that Jill trains with, because I make the assumption that like he's got to be really great, because like I could imagine like if I had to coach Jill like in strength conditioning, like that would be really intimidating because she has such a robust knowledge of the body and particularly her body. And I could imagine how, even as coachable as I'm sure she is, like there's like certain things that like, she wouldn't just accept or be as open-minded to with like just anybody that's working with her, and so where that kind of comes in with like how, you want to be open-minded, you want to give someone the benefit of the doubt, but also you want to like know that they have like some sort of a shared context that they're working with.
Well, especially when it comes to your body, and as coaches, and we all have our expertise and our focuses and our interests. It's not like you're just going to pick any random Joe off the street and be like, teach me how to do double unders.
Right.
You also will, I imagine, spend the time researching and finding somebody who contextually, you already are on the same page, or there will be a lot of conflict with it. I can just see.
Yeah.
So maybe people are avoiding it because they have had that conflict in the past with somebody. It's just as important as finding the right teacher, because not everybody... Not only is it the information, but then also the personalities, making sure the personalities get together and you like what they have to offer. And the greatest thing about this is like, you're not marrying anybody.
Yeah, totally.
If you don't like it, just move on.
Right. And to remember again, the point about collaboration, that like it's a relationship and it should be, I think the key to coaching is it's happening by permission and that it's back and forth, it's very much of that more ping-ponging type of fashion, as opposed to someone just sitting in a chair and you kind of just projecting onto them, or rather them projecting onto you, right? That like it should be dynamic, and I think it works both ways. It's bi-directional, and so perhaps for someone that you're working with to be more coachable, you need to show them that you're open to like what they have to say and give them the benefit of the doubt of the experience they've had, and also try to understand the experience that they are coming from. So not to just dismiss ideas that they have as like, no, that's not good. Like just do it this way.
And I think also, you might find somebody who is the right fit, and at some point you outgrow one another.
Yeah, that's a great point.
growing up, I took classical piano lessons for 8 years with Mrs. Wiggins. Mrs. Wiggins was awesome. She taught me so much. And then in high school, I didn't want to do classical piano anymore. It wasn't that she didn't have anything more to offer, it's just like a mutual understanding that like, we both got what we needed to get and ready to move on.
You wanted to improvise. You wanted to groove.
Oh my God, and I hated it. I should have known.
Which, classical or improvising?
No, jazz.
Oh, yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah, and the more I kind of like try to uncover like my operating system, which I've been working with a coach to do as well, I realize like how much I dislike not spontaneity, but like unplanned things. It's super uncomfortable. So even, like the gym, going to the gym and just doing stuff, I'm like, what would I do? That's what I love about CrossFit. And that's what I love about getting programming from you is like, I go in with a plan. I've done research beforehand of like what each movement is. So I know, it literally is like the perfect equation for me and how I operate, which is so funny to realize it now.
Yeah, totally. And that's great. Like, and that self-awareness to again internalize and know when you are selecting a coach or also when you're working with someone else, to think about, what is their process, and they may be of the type that wants more spontaneity and therefore doesn't need as much structure, but you don't know that unless, you're willing to have that conversation with them and allow that give and take to take place to observe how then they are able to display the ability to be coachable.
Yeah. And I think coaching in general, or at least for me, the type of relationship I'm trying to make with my students and my clients is not one where they are 100% dependent on me.
Yes.
I want to empower them with the knowledge and the tools so that at some point we do outgrow one another. So that they are empowered and knowledgeable enough to handle whatever it is they need to handle. I do nobody or anybody any favors by holding their hand all day, every day.
Right. Make yourself functionally obsolete.
Yeah. And I think people appreciate that more.
Yeah.
I know I always want to do stuff myself. And so when working with somebody, when they tell me how to do it and teach me how to do it, it's so much better than just like waiting on them to figure it out. It's like, was it fish for a man, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. I want to be a lifetime feeder of the fishes.
Yeah. And I think to that point, sometimes when someone appears to be not very coachable, it's not actually a reflection on them. It's a reflection on unideal coaching, to put it nicely. That like there wasn't enough of the context underlaid from the beginning for them to continue to respond to the coaching that you give them throughout. So like it's very kind of hit or miss with how they're understanding it and then able to continue to exponentially grow without you. And I see this a lot in the CrossFit space, is that it's very easy to kind of give a quick fix or a piecemeal cue, but without somebody understanding the order of operations and the system at play for the bigger themes we're trying to get at. Yeah, the why. The whys, then it's just like kind of a hamster wheel sort of thing of being lost and chasing problems as opposed to building a barrierlessness a la cultivating, practicing barrierlessness. My mom has been working with this physical therapist for this elbow pain she's had, and then she recently got surgery on one of her fingers. She got like her index finger and her middle finger like fused together because
My goodness.
yeah, it's just like so much pain and then arthritis and craziness. But I was a little uncomfortable with the stuff that the physical therapist was giving my mom because it just like wasn't really helping, and she also wasn't being compliant with it at all. So it just kind of seemed like a lose-lose. Yeah. So I went with her to the session one day to just kind of observe and kind of give my thoughts. And
I'm sure the PT loved having you.
Yeah, she definitely didn't love it, but to her credit, she, was like cool with it. And, I was like really trying to be respectful. And, but one of the things that I then even realized when my mom and I came back from that appointment and I was trying to work with her on some of the stuff the PT said and then give her what I felt were better ways to do what the PT was trying to get her to do, is that she had no concept of breathing, right? That like all her life, she's had a lot of different stomach surgeries, mainly of which because I was a C-section and my brother was a C-section.
You ruined her.
And she's gone through like her whole life basically sucking in as the way in which to, as she thought, was like working on her abs and then making it so that like, she didn't look as fat in that region. And in doing so, right, like just totally messing with the buoyancy of the diaphragm.
Yeah.
And so, the PT wanted her to, just do this basic tricep stretch. And so the PT kind of showed her just like, oh, take your hand on your elbow and lift up, but no context of like, okay, neutral spine. Like it doesn't do you any good to just, yank on your elbow and then put your low back into extension. And so for me to like take a step back and be like, okay, mom, first of all, we're going to do this against the wall. So you have like something to lean into. And I want you to think about setting your feet, turning on the glutes, and let me give you a sense of how I want you to breathe abdominally to brace a good position and then go through that stretch. And like, it was just another one of these moments where it's like, man, all these people are going through the PT office. They're getting these piecemeal descriptions of like things they should be doing, but the underlying order of operations for how things should work, that why isn't being given to them to ever really become self-sufficient and resolving of the many issues.
Yeah. Well, and also I'm sure to the PT's credit, it was a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's doing the best she can with the knowledge that she has.
Yeah, totally.
And, the diaphragm and everything you just described with your mother is also so common with so many people, like the number of abdominal surgeries we have in this country for things that could potentially be resolved by lifestyle changes or moving more. Even the statistic that Jill mentions in the role model of the U.S. has 4.6% of the world's population and yet consumes 80% of the world's opiate supply.
Wow.
80%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
So,
wow.
I know. It's like 4.6% of us consume 80% of the global opiate supply. So already...
Way to hog it.
I know.
Have you ever heard of sharing America?
But like already in the U.S., we have such an issue with pain and discomfort. And it is as simple as relearning how to breathe, something that infants already know how to do, that is disrupted from bad posture, from all the sitting that we do, from injuries, from surgeries, and that this interconnected body is not looked at as a whole.
Yeah.
that we are cut up into all of these parts and like, oh, well, your elbow hurts, then let's just do this tricep stretch, because that's obviously where the problem is coming from.
Right.
But if you look at, even NKT or some of those other, it's like, oh, your elbow hurts. Well, it's coming from, facilitation of your second toe.
Right.
But it literally sometimes is that kind of stuff, which is just like so crazy. And I know for both of us, and the role model, you cannot separate the body into pieces.
Yeah.
Every piece plays a part. Every part is connected. And how you move your body and how you don't move your body and what one thing does and what another thing does or doesn't do is going to have a global effect all the time.
Right. So starting with that, and I think that is, it's becoming more of a common starting place among many practitioners that are working with people as it relates to physical orthopedic type issues, but always continuing to underscore that context, at least to just give people to help them kind of give themselves some slack, or cut themselves some slack of like, God, I don't know what's going on. And it's like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on either. Like at the moment anyway, it's like there is so much that connectivity is like many, many layers deep. And I want you to continue to hold that context as you get frustrated with why the problem isn't being resolved, because it's not so specified or one-dimensional. And then also carry that context over to in the class when you're doing a certain movement or you're doing a collection of movements, have the mindfulness that is going to respect that connectivity and not allow yourself to get away with some of the compensations that are in response to, hey, I'm trying to go faster, or I want to burn more because I got to lose that weight, because we already said, hey, that connectivity is that big piece. And by allowing yourself to succumb to some more of those like immediate impulses and desires, you're throwing a wrench into that connectivity and perhaps making things harder on yourself, and creating more problems that then don't allow us to have you build on the many skills we want you to be learning within this fitness movement space.
I think also as I don't know if it's just Americans, but for sure Americans, we want the quick fix and we want it now.
Yeah.
Hence 80% of the world's opiate supplies, because like I'm in pain and I want it to be gone now. And so like when you come with this interconnected body approach, sometimes stuff doesn't happen instantaneously. And other times it does. I mean, I think that we understand so little of the body and how it works. And I don't know that we'll ever understand it perfectly, because it's a constantly dynamic system, always changing. Yeah, but I think if it would be so cool. And also for physical therapy, I mean, one of the reasons why I chose not to go to physical therapy school is because then you put yourself into a box down a path where, because of insurance, you are limited to what you can do and what you can't do. But how radical would it be if every physical therapist, every doctor, when somebody came in with pain, the first conversation was, let me watch you breathe.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
And I think, even for myself, like we forget some of those just to even address those basics, like sometimes it'll kind of come to me later and it's like I'll just to try and get people to understand more midline stabilization. It's like, okay, well, let's try and go into this hollow body shape and let me have you breathe first. And then it's there that I'm like, whoa. Just breathe in your belly. And then it's like, you realize like, oh, that's not even happening. And it's like, okay, well, let's take some steps back. That it's easy to forget how something as what we assume to be so simple or second nature or automatic as breathing to be so disrupted. And having to layer that in with the coaching to remind people like, hey, we have to address these basics, because it's the basics that are going to continue to equip you with a better ability to be coachable. And again, to my earlier point, the sort of dichotomy or continuum of willingness versus ability, you may be the most intellectually willing person to take on new education and admit what you don't know. But if some of these underlying concepts aren't present, or you haven't experienced this type of thing before to draw on, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of that thing that you're like, have the best intentions to do.
Well, you got to know the basics. Got to learn your ABCs before you can start writing, And so understanding the basics, and I think sometimes we just get too caught up in this huge movement thing, whatever it is. And then when you go back to the basics, it's like, whoa, I didn't realize that was hiding there all along.
Yeah. And then within that coaching role, that role of speaking at the podium, is that struggle with admitting like, hey, it's like, I think I've forgotten some of the basics. I'm sure for some people when they take the level 1 yoga tune-up course, and for some of them going over the directions of movement is sort of like, at first it seems very remedial, and then it kind of like scares them, because they're like, wow, like I don't know how to embody this as well as like I maybe understood it from some previous education that I had. Or even to just have the realization that like, hey, I'm a movement educator, and I wasn't even really sure the difference between abduction and adduction, and like just again to kind of have the okay with that give and take.
Yeah.
Like, and for all of us as coaches to like let down our guards a little bit more, so that like we can all be learning from each other more easily and seamlessly, and one person can know something of like really high order thinking and still be a little unsure about abduction versus adduction, and that's okay, and let that continue to ebb and flow within the learning process.
Totally. I mean, I'm still trying to remember all of the directions of movement for the thumb.
Yeah, man.
Blows my mind. It's so confusing.
Little deviation stuff.
Yeah. But not knowing something doesn't mean you suck.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're a crap coach and that you should just stop now. It doesn't. I mean, who knows what it means for you? It's different for everybody, but like, how cool is it that you still have something to learn? So I think a mental reframe can help all of us to be a little bit more coachable in every aspect. And, even if you know something about one thing, you might not know it in that much of a detail. Like, there's so much out there that we don't know.
Yeah.
So much.
Definitely. And being open to the process of assimilation, and also the process of chipping away, that like maybe at times it's like, well, I don't need to use that, and that's okay. That, that's maybe the beauty in learning various techniques and approaches, and trusting that process of like, I'm just going to continue to consume in a sense, and like let it all digest as it may. we have these crazy moments in life where we hear something in the first part of the day that we'd never heard before, and then we hear almost the same thing in the later half of the day. And there's just like that kind of Tetris thing that happens with those two different but very similar pieces of information that you could never have predicted. And for me, like always trying to remind myself of, having faith in that process, that like I'm perhaps hearing something right now that I don't really understand, but let me just kind of like file that away. And this is really hard for me, like, and not obsess over it. Because I have witnessed firsthand how like then something will come later on. I'll be listening to someone else, I'll be reading something, and it's like, oh yeah, that thing, like whoosh, bam. And then, that connection happens and like reaffirms my faith in this crazy world of information and learning and coaching and teaching and sharing and trying to help people feel better.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about, consuming and digesting information, I was thinking of, I think it's Eric Carlisle's book, The Hungry Caterpillar. Did you ever read that when you were a kid?
No.
Oh, it has beautiful illustrations, but basically this little caterpillar is born and he's hungry. So he just starts eating and he eats everything. And, like over the course of the week, he just has like this grand, massive feast. But then he turns into this butterfly. So I was kind of thinking of that idea, like, you continue to consume information. Because sometimes I worry, I'm like, am I spending too much time reading things online? But I'm finding it all to be interesting. And a week from now, a month from now, ping, like you're saying, the Tetris pieces fall into place. It makes sense, or I'm able to reference back to it, or it becomes a context piece in one of my classes. And then that moment becomes a butterfly. It all comes together.
Do you have a good, or just any system, a good system, or just any system of how you review information you've consumed previously? Or like one of the things I've been thinking about more and struggling with is like, all right, I've taken a lot of these courses. I have so many notes, and like I have so many packets and handouts and books. And it's like, how do I more proactively assign the time to go back and refamiliarize myself with these pieces of content so that they're more readily on hand than having to sort of chase something reactively, because I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I think there was maybe an answer in one of these things. Do you have a process or a practice of that sort?
Sort of. A huge piece of that is my blog.
Yeah.
When I come up with a research article, or, I've just experienced something, my way of synthesizing and getting it out is writing an article.
Yeah.
And I could go on for hours and hours about how to write a blog, but that's a good way for me to just kind of like distill and figure out what did I learn and how can I make it applicable for my readers and my students. Another thing I like to do, which is kind of like the same lines, is to teach it.
Yeah.
So I'll pull, like, if whatever the information is a teachable piece of information, then I'll introduce that in a class somehow. And then that helps me to better embody it. I get to kind of stumble through the cues and remember it better that way. Or I'd say the third one would be like, if, like you're saying, if it comes to you and you're like, oh, there was something and I try to remember, I'll just go and look it up. And maybe that time it sticks. Maybe I have to do that 2 or 3 more times before it sticks. But eventually it sticks.
Yeah, one of the things I have been trying to do more regularly, I think for like a year now, is practicing caution with like immediately going to Google, even for like simple things that like I know otherwise there's like an answer to in one of these books that I have, or like some of the like the notes that I have in some spiral, and because like finding it there anyway is going to be more sustainable than the quick fix that really is that, you know, kind of need to just like quiet the question mark that has prompted me to ask Jeeves, so to speak.
Oh my gosh, ask Jeeves. Throwback. Yeah. I was talking about that, I think like a week ago with some friends, and we were just like, man, kids, like, let's say a kid born today may never know what it's like to use a book as a reference item because everything is digitized and it's on the internet. But what I love about my textbooks is that I can flip them open to what I want to know and then read the pages after, read the pages before, and, you know, figure out something that I didn't know until I was on that page.
Right. And again, it's like that's only coming through that process. And then it's like that retrospection of like, hey, I didn't know that. And now that I'm being aware of that experience, how can I set up my environment to replicate that type of experience and then make decisions accordingly to embrace that third ring of not knowing what you don't know. And I always think people like, I'm always surprised at how some people are like so kind of foreign to that idea when I talk to them about like, you know, kind of career goals or why I'm taking a particular class, you know, and I don't have like a particular answer, you know, but for me, it's like, it's really about like, hey, you know, like I'm kind of, it's like going to do Gil Headley's dissection lab, you know, for like a lot of people, it's like, what, why are you doing that? You know, it's like I know like this is an experience to take away like not knowing what I didn't know. You know, and it's like that's enough, you know, it's like on my way. But for, you know, for others like that, you know, like not having kind of practiced or even like having the awareness to observe that type of experience taking place where you're like really acknowledging that aha moment, you're not as accustomed to kind of setting up life circumstances to, you know, stumble upon these really great learning opportunities.
Yeah, because there's so much out there. So you just have to look up from the path you're on, and you might notice a real cool tree out there. Or what did you say? The forest beyond the trees.
Forest beyond the trees.
You didn't even know it was there.
Like wow. Yeah, that's why I always want to try new restaurants. Come on, guys.
I'm also that way with recipes, too. Like, I'll make it, and it'll be really good. And then the next time I'll change something. It drives my husband crazy. He's like, why can't we have it just the way we had it? I'm like, well, what if it was, like, better this time?
Yeah. Like, explore. Tap into it. Like, little bit of risk-taking. The coach needs to be okay taking those risks. I'd say, especially in the classes where, you know, again, that can reveal something that you didn't know could be so helpful to solving a problem that you were witnessing over and over again.
Yeah, and I think we mentally set up this idea like, oh, if I take this risk and I fall, this fall is going to be like so huge. And the ground is really close.
Right.
Just try it. You never know what's going to happen. You might fail. You might just fail.
Yeah, I love the visual of how, you know, the balance beam that's 2 feet off the ground that we walk on so confidently. And then the same balance beam that's like now 20 feet off the ground, like nothing's really changed. Like yes, it's higher up, but that balance beam is technically the same, right? Like,
right.
And yet, now we've gotten in our own way of being able to execute, what otherwise was a very confident action.
As someone who's kind of not so keen on heights, I'm like, 20 feet's a big distance. That's a really long fall.
This is true, man. 18
Totally
feet.
different.
That's why, those gradual progressions and regressions. Like, okay,
Yes.
3 feet, 4 feet. Maybe we'll take a jump now. 6.
Oh, but you just said 20. I was like, I'm not going straight to 20. What happened to 2, 4, 5, 6?
That's true. Yeah. And we gotta remember that as well.
For my 90th birthday, then I'll get to 20. So, yeah. So I think we're at about time for today.
Indeed.
Do you have a quote?
Yes.
Ooh. Actually, I just stumbled upon one that I think works quite well. This is in my passion planner.
Okay.
So you might have it too, but this is a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. Action expresses priorities.
Ooh, wow.
I know, right? It's like this week's quote and everything is just so perfect for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So do it. Take the leap. The fall is not as far as you think it is.
That's great. Say is the quote, I just started re-listening to Big Magic. Elizabeth Gilbert, and she quotes Jack Gilbert, the poet, in the beginning, and his quote or from one of his poems is, have the acceptance to be stubbornly glad in spite of the ruthless furnace of the world. Something of that. And I just like the juxtapositions of words: stubborn gladness, ruthless furnace, and again, like this idea of be resilient about how you have faith in yourself and your own process, and that process that may not have all the answers right now, but will reveal itself if you just keep continuing to embrace that third ring of not knowing what you don't know.
And just imagine how boring life would be if you already knew everything. There'd be nothing new to discover. What a snooze fest.
Snooze fest. No opportunity to say the best word in the English language. Interesting. Interesting. All right. On that note, we will check out Behind the Podium. We will see, or rather talk to our audience in the near future. I am Jared Cohen. You can find me at cpbgrowth.com or it's DERAJ on Instagram or Twitter.
Daraj.
It's Daraj.
Yes, and show notes for today's episode with all the awesome stuff we talked about live at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. And you can find me at aewellness.com and on Twitter and Instagram at Holla for Mala.
Holla for Mala.
Holla.
Holla.
Until next time.
Until next time. Later.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.